Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 30th of October, 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today, Patrick Henningsen from 21st Century Wire. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
Great to be with you, Mike.
Sorry we didn't make it on Monday. We had a couple of technical gremlins, but that's been sorted out now. So, well, the good news, Pat, is that unsurprisingly, we have a general election. It's on the 12th of December. This has been Boris's strategy all along. He basically started campaigning the day he became Prime Minister. So everybody getting ready for a vote on the 12th. There had been some discussion about holding it a couple of days earlier, but clearly Boris decided to allay any fears that he would try to push through the withdrawal bill before, if he was on his longer timetable. So it's in the House of Lords today. There's not likely to be any opposition to that. It'll come back, it'll get royal assent and so on. So this is the early parliamentary general election bill. Well, the main reason, of course, that there has to be such a bill is because of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, Pat, and the fact that a two-thirds majority was required in order to call an election under the terms of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So they just simply introduced a new bill to Parliament, which only, of course, requires a majority of one, and that's why they were able to get that through. So that amended the Fixed Term Parliaments Act. So 4th of November, a new Speaker will be elected. There's a bit of concern that if we weren't leaving on the 31st of October, that perhaps the Speaker would continue in his role, as popular as he is, I say with tongue firmly in cheek. But he's definitely on his way as of tomorrow. And on the 4th will be an election for a new Speaker. And then on the 6th, Parliament will be dissolved. So this is perhaps one of the shortest parliaments that there's ever been. The Queen's speech, and within a couple of weeks dissolved again for another general election. So the Queen will have to host another Queen's speech in December or January. I would imagine it'll be January. And the question is, will she wear her crown for that? But then, the minimum 5 weeks requirement in order to get this election done before Christmas. So I wonder what the...
Do you think this is too early for Labour? Would they have preferred to have this much later down the road, Mike?
I think there's no question of that. Labour does not want a general election. They've been backed into this. They wanted to hold a second referendum rather than a general election. They've been backed into this because they were left in the position that it was just looking embarrassing that they were trying to run away from the democratic process. That's how ordinary people were seeing it. But the question is, what happens next? So let's just briefly have a look at some of the mainstream press. Well, the Daily Express, which of course is a Brexit newspaper, December 12th, when Britain will vote once and for all to deliver Brexit. The Sun, New Year's Leave is their major headline. If Boris wins December 12th election, we can get Brexit done by New Year's Leave. The sort of leaning towards Brexit side seem to be quite supportive so far. Now, you brought in 2 front pages, which I have some graphics of today, because here's the Mirror. It's time to stuff the turkey, and the turkey in this case is Boris. And the Daily Mail, don't let the Grinch steal your Christmas, and the Grinch in this case is Corbyn. And so the question is, are we looking at another hung parliament here, a totally divided parliament? And there's a lot to say that we are, because if the mainstream press divides along these lines, and we see people being bombarded in all directions with all kinds of different narratives and all kinds of a completely broad attack on the minds of the population, then clearly people are going to be left in a bit of a spin, and you're going to get a voting result which is appropriate to that.
Well, I've been looking at the odds makers on this, Mike, early on, and certainly the Conservatives have a thumping majority as it stands today, and is looking at 35% with an additional potential, I say, 11% Brexit Party possible seats, Mike. That would bring a total up to 46%. And the Labour, if there is a Labour, Liberal Democrat, SNP coalition, would edge the Conservative Brexit coalition
by
1 point. but there's still a few free radicals floating around in there. One of those is the DUP. Certainly, that's a potential deal maker or deal breaker on this issue, especially with Brexit. So, hung parliament, the odds I think, will get shorter as we get closer to the general election.
Well, I think that may well be the case, but I think it depends very much on what position the mainstream press takes and what position the BBC takes as well, because of course these, like it or not, these organs do influence public opinion.
But as many have pointed out, the Sun, the king is traditionally much of a kingmaker in terms of elections. They look like they're backing, as you said earlier before the program when we talked, they're backing Boris and the deal. So they're not going full orthodox, no deal Brexit. And so, but the BBC, Mike, that is a wild card because the BBC hates Jeremy Corbyn with a passion and they're Remainer to the core. So how are they going to resolve that in their coverage of the election? How is the BBC going to, from a bias point of view, which institutionally they are biased towards the establishment, but what does the establishment do about Jeremy Corbyn? This is the question.
I think that Boris's Brexit is so soft that it's tantamount to Remain, and I think we might see the opportunity being taken to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn.
So they will plunge the knife into the back once and for all to get rid of this Corbyn problem that the establishment have, right?
I think that's quite likely. I think that's quite likely.
Mark our words, and we'll see what
happens. Well, we'll see. I'm not laying any bets on that one, but we'll see what happens. Will Project Fear be a big part of the coming media coverage? I suspect it will. Now, I think as this election process continues, we're going to see more and more ridiculous headlines in the press. And I think it's going to be very difficult for people to actually keep on top of it all.
And I think in the run-up to Christmas, Mike, economics features heavily because everybody's thinking about money running up into the holiday season. People are thinking about those haves and have-nots, the rich, the poor, the soup kitchens versus the elite shopping at Harvey Nichols and Harrods. So the Project Fear will play a prominent role in media coverage in the run-up to this election more than ever before, and it will have emotional impact because of the Christmas season.
Okay, so the question is, will Boris end up with a majority? I think he possibly will, depending on what the press does. But as we said, the possibility of a hung parliament. But Boris's biggest problem, I think, is the Brexit Party. What are they going to do? Now, I have to say that if we look at what Nigel Farage tweeted out late last night, at last the deadlock in Parliament is broken. Brexit now has a chance to succeed. And some of the mainstream press coverage on this during this morning, it's looking like the Brexit Party is setting itself up to attempt some kind of election pact with the Conservative Party, in which case the chances of a hung parliament are lessened because the Brexit Party has the potential to divide the Brexit vote, very much has that potential. Now, the Brexit Party's spokesperson was reported as saying this morning, I know for a fact that the Labour establishment in Wales and the North East, especially Durham, are really worried because they are intending to try to wipe out Labour in the north of England. Now, Labour, of course, the north of England is one of their heartlands, but people in the north of England, Labour supporters in the north of England, were very pro-Brexit, and they're feeling extremely betrayed by the Labour Party at the moment, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they vote.
So we can see a whole complete realignment of British politics with this general election, Mike. I think if you insert a new party, a Brexit Party candidates, very much right wing, and you have this sort of demolishing of the Labour Party as we once knew it through this general could change the face, at least for the next decade, of British politics.
I'm not certain that it would change the face any further than this particular election, but of course this election absolutely could affect politics for the next decade, for sure. Now, in terms of coalitions, obviously the Tory party is now declared as leaving the EU with a deal, which we argue isn't leaving at all, or at least I argue isn't leaving at all. The Labour Party wants a second referendum. Liberal Democrats are saying that they want to cancel Brexit altogether. The SNP are happy with the second referendum so long as Brexit doesn't go ahead. And of course, Brexit Party wants to leave as much as possible, so they'd be quite happy with a no deal. So I'm not sure what scope there are in terms of coalitions there, particularly on the opposition side, whether Joe Swinson and the Liberal Democrats would swallow their pride and actually go into a coalition with the Labour Party.
And whether Labour, a lot of Labour members would have to swallow a lot to go into coalition with Joe Swinson as well. She's not particularly popular with a lot of people in that party either, Mike. So it's or the press. So it will be interesting. So
the pantomime continues. Apparently, we've only got 5 more weeks of this nonsense to go before the election, and maybe after that. You know, there was a lot of coverage over the last couple of days about how this is going to destroy Christmas, but actually, it might just be an early Christmas present. We have to wait and see. If
there's only one guarantee, that when this is over, a lot of alcohol will be consumed by the winners and equally as much by the losers in this case. So that's the only thing that you can bank on. There will be great bumper sales in terms of booze this Christmas season.
Okay, well, enough Brexit for today. Let's move on then. Well, good news, Patrick, because al-Baghdadi was removed from the planet.
Yes, the Caliph is dead. Long live the Caliph. There will be others following in his footsteps. But yes, there's a big announcement. To great dramatic fanfare, Donald Trump's announced the killing of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And it was it didn't disappoint in terms of theatrics, this one. If you thought that you could top the Osama bin Laden raid in terms of theatrics and loose ends that are very difficult to tie together, well, think again. This tops it by orders of magnitude. But let's look at what some of the other governments are saying right now, Mike.
Well, there's Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for the Kremlin. He said, if this information about al-Baghdadi's death is indeed confirmed, in general, we could speak about the US president's serious contribution to the fight against international terrorism. So quite they are requiring confirmation, although they're quite positive about it. There's a big if there.
The first word is very key there, if. So Russia's hedging its bets clearly on that one. So, but this is now. There's so many twists and turns to this story. Let's just start off here, and we'll work our way backwards. Trump faces renewed backlash for abandoning the Kurds in Syria, as it is revealed that it is Kurdish intelligence that helped to locate al-Baghdadi in his compound in Idlib, by the way. Idlib is the province in Syria, is currently occupied by al-Qaeda militants that the West keeps saying is home to peaceful protesters. Mm-hmm. Well, it's also the base of ISIS as well, as we found out. Well, apparently, if you believe this story anyway. But so they helped to locate, the Kurds helped to locate al-Baghdadi where he blew himself up, and 3 of his children in a dead-end tunnel, basically. And the subtext is important. The Daily Mail is always very useful in showing us what the establishment want us to believe. The U.S. military operation to strike ISIS leader was a success. Kurdish intelligence helped to nail him, etc. Baghdadi was tracked down following the arrest and interrogation of one of his wives and a courier. This reminds us of the bin Laden narrative, and Trump's abrupt decision to pull out the troops from Syria apparently jeopardized the operation. But by the same token, they're saying that because of that decision, Pentagon officials were forced to green light the raid to take place before their troops, spies, helicopters are withdrawn from Syria. Mike, now this begs the question, if you believe what you just read there, that means that they have always known where Baghdadi has been residing, and they simply took this opportunity to push the button on this operation. If you believe what you're reading, okay,
right.
There's reasons for me to believe and many of our viewers as well that some of this doesn't actually add up, and we'll go through some of those details in a minute, Mike. But it's funny how the media is already hedging on this issue. So I find it quite amazing. But let's look at what Donald Trump is claiming for a minute. Okay, so this is what Trump is claiming. Firstly, we killed the world's #1 terrorist. That's debatable. There's a few governments that I would put ahead of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi on that list, but let's move on. Baghdadi was whimpering and crying as our dogs chased him down the tunnel. Now, the question is, how would you know that he was whimpering and crying when dogs were chasing him down the tunnel? We might have a few possible answers for that, which we might explore in a minute, but it's very difficult to square that circle. And he ignited his suicide vest, rather conveniently, and the tunnel collapsed. And he died like a dog, according to Donald Trump. So, interesting choice of words. We'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. We checked his DNA, it's him. So, he ignited his suicide vest, the tunnel collapsed, and we checked his DNA. So I'm trying to work out exactly how those three things happened and in what order, who checked the DNA, who picked up the sample, where was it processed, how long did this take to complete, and so forth. So let's keep going. The last one, the world is a much safer place without him.
Well, I mean, I certainly feel much safer.
You do, yeah. Well, Americans do. Americans must be sleeping better at night because of this. So those are the claims. Now we'll actually address all of these claims by looking at a few details of this story. So let's start here. Al-Baghdadi dead again. Well, a lot of people have pointed out, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen these lists online. Baghdadi previously reported killed not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times.
6 times.
Not 5 times, but 6 times. So, dead again. You remember that film? Yeah. Well, on a pastiche of that film's title, we'll ask that question once again, dead again. So, this could be potentially the 6th time. The world record is al-Zakwari in Iraq, and he was actually killed, reported dead 6 times. So this ties the world record for most deaths.
Of the same person.
Of the same person.
Yeah.
So that is the first thing we'll put. Now, here is a man that you might feel sorry for. Just check out the expression on his face. This is Trump's new head of the Joint Chiefs. He's got a very tough job. Make no mistake about it. This is General Mark Milley, new head of the Joint Chiefs. He said, I know the president had planned to talk to the unit and the unit members, but I don't know what the source of that was. I assume it was talking directly to unit members. He's talking about the whimpering and the crying, Mike. So this is the head of the Joint Chiefs saying he doesn't know where Trump got that piece of information. So he doesn't know, even the head of the Joint Chiefs, who is in charge of all these units, he didn't hear this. So he's wondering, how did the president know what emotional state Baghdadi was in when they were making chase? So that's interesting. And there's only one way you could probably know in this, and that if there was a canine terror cam attached to Conan, the dog's name is Conan, attached to Conan's head, and that somehow recorded the distraught emotional state of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as he ran down the tunnel in his suicide vests with 3 children in tow, being chased by a German Shepherd.
Do we know if Conan survived?
We think Conan might have survived with minor injuries,
right,
according to some reports, but yet haven't had any specifics. The dogs survived, I'm told, with minor injuries. So if the dog survived, Mike, he couldn't have been very close to Baghdadi if he ignited his suicide vest. So
right,
wouldn't have been able to capture the whimpering and the crying, even if he was wearing a high-tech terror cam, like this experimental piece of equipment, which is being used by U.S. and other NATO member states. Britain's also pioneering a dog cam tech, dog armor, everything like that.
Right.
It's quite an interesting little
I mean, what's interesting about this, Patrick, is that rather than questioning this, the mainstream press have grabbed the narrative with both hands, and this is typical. Washington Post here: a dog helped kill Baghdadi, joining a long history of canine war heroes. Now, of course, dogs have been used in the military for a long time, and they've performed extremely well in a lot of cases, but it's just incredible that there's no skepticism in the mainstream press anymore. Something has been said. Where is the skepticism over Trump's statements from the press here? They seem to be, depending on what subject we're talking about, they seem to be willing to take his words and run with them.
Well, all the news feeds are official sources. In fact, on the issue of the DNA testing, this is the next big issue. So on the issue of the DNA testing, according to Reuters, Baghdadi's remains were transported to a secure facility to confirm his identity with forensic DNA testing. This is Miley here. Now, how did they have a DNA sample of Baghdadi beforehand? And people will say, well, he was interned in Camp Bucca in Iraq before the formation of ISIS back in 2004 or something like this, 2005, and they must have DNA tested all the prisoners there. That's not necessarily certain. We don't know that. So that's one claim there. But here's how they've backed up this story. And according to anonymous sources, Mike, I believe anonymous sources, actually on this particular story, I'm not sure if anyone's put their name to it, but al-Baghdadi's underwear was stolen by a Kurdish spy in Idlib just days before the raid, and DNA was tested. And so they had his DNA on file because a Kurdish spy went to Idlib, snuck into his house, and stole his underwear. How does that sound?
What is this, Patrick? Is this the mainstream media attempting to see how far they can take a story and still have the public swallow it?
This is what they're saying. So what I'm going to say is, if this is the case, and this is how they have his DNA sample, then there's no chain of custody. There's no chain of custody between this claim and this Kurdish operative, and so it's very difficult to say whose underwear he took. Could have been someone else in the compound. This is the same chain of custody issues that we had with the white helmets taking, quote, sarin samples from Khan Sheikhoun, or chlorine samples or sarin samples from Duma, to high-profile chemical weapons attacks that triggered U.S. intervention. Very high-profile events, and you have zero chain of custody whatsoever with regards to the sort of the chemical samples or the biological samples. So we have the same issue here. So it's a black hole of forensic chain of custody. Syria is, and the U.S. looks like they're still operating in that black hole. But it doesn't end there. Here's Milley again. The U.S. military disposed of Baghdadi's remains appropriately, quote, appropriately, in accordance with our standard operating procedures and in accordance with the law of armed conflict. So he's saying that Baghdadi he was blown to bits in a tunnel, and they gathered his remains somehow. It doesn't say who gathered the remains. Could have been the white helmets. Could have actually been the white helmets, actually. And they did receive $4.5 million last week from the White House in that strange payment that was sent to the white helmet. So I'm just asking that question. There might be a relationship between these two events. So he was buried at sea, we're told. He was buried at sea. Now, this isn't the first high-profile terror leader to be buried at sea. If you remember, back in 2011, well, this year it's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi being dropped in the ocean, and in 2011 it was Osama bin Laden. So two high-profile, the top terror threats of all time in history: Al-Qaeda leader bin Laden, ISIS leader al-Baghdadi, both buried at sea. And apparently the U.S. government have said this is Islamic custom. And we did a little research to find out if that's actually the case. And we came with some interesting results. Burial at sea. Given the gruesome nature of Baghdadi's death, it was unlikely the U.S. military followed as complete a process as it did after the Navy SEALs killed Al-Qaeda former founder Osama bin Laden in 2011 in Pakistan. So that's very ambiguous, the Reuters reports on this. And again, this is, I believe, anonymous government officials, U.S. officials. So, and again, burial at sea. And here we go, Mike. U.S. officials who spoke on condition of anonymity did not disclose where this ritual performed and how long it lasted. Two officials said they believed his remains were delivered to the sea from aircraft. So that means they flew over the Mediterranean or some sea, we don't know which sea, and they chucked his remains out the window. I don't know. This is what we're feeling here, Mike, in terms of finding out what really happened. So let's think about this bin Laden narrative. Well, back in 2011, sea burial of Osama bin Laden breaks Sharia law, says Muslim scholars. So this idea that it's an Islamic burial at sea, I mean, this is enough to fool, your average American, probably Fox News watching American, but people who can read and use the internet probably know a little bit better than that. And so we did a little bit of research here, and this is what we found. This is from an Islamic expert, scholar here. It's best to bury the deceased in a cemetery. Cemeteries are located on land, for those who aren't familiar with these customs. If someone happens to die on a ship and it's impossible to bury him on the land, the body is then placed tightly lashed between two planks and thrown into the sea, and of course weights are attached with this. In the case of Osama bin Laden, he would have been strapped to his kidney dialysis machine when they dumped him overboard of the USS Carl Vinson. But that's another story. So, and this is from the Sunni Fiqh book of Umdat al-Salik. So that's an Islamic scholar basically saying, actually, Islamic burial is not at sea. Only in the circumstances where the person is on a ship, has died at sea, and the body must be sort of processed and dealt with respectfully, but in a timely manner at sea before it decomposes on board the ship. So, and by the way, the U.S. didn't allow for such Islamic traditions, let's say, with the death of Muammar Gaddafi, who they left in a meat locker for a couple of weeks, or the sons, Uday and Qusay, the sons of Saddam Hussein, who they left for the world to see, kind of put them on show for a week or two in Iraq. So it's very inconsistent, is what we're saying with this. So it doesn't really add up. It's a very difficult story to sell, Mike. We don't have any proof of anything in actuality, but we have to take our government's word for it, because why would the U.S. government lie about anything? Have they ever lied about anything important, ever? So anyway, don't fear not. The number 2 guy has also been killed, Abu al-Hassan al-Maharkir, and he is apparently second in command, and he's the number 2 guy. This is the famous term in America, number 2 guy, made famous by George Bush. But don't worry, there's another number 2 guy, Abdullah Kardash. So keeping up with the Kardash, he's well, actually, according to Iraqi intelligence, he was killed in 2011. So a little bit of a leadership crisis here with ISIS. Not only do they not know who's going to take over, nobody can work out who's still alive, Mike.
Well, I mean, it seems to be a requirement of leadership is that you've been killed at least once.
Yeah, otherwise you're not worth your salt,
Right.
are you? So there you go. So Trump's claim, and the last one I'm going to have to highlight here, we're combating terror and keeping Americans safe. Okay, that's not actually true at all. The fact is, if you look at the evidence, if you watch the reporting that we've done on this program, you'll know that the United States is not really combating terror. They're arming, they're facilitating, they're financing al-Qaeda affiliates for years now. And they're not keeping Americans safe by doing this. They're putting American lives at risk, not just American lives, but many other people's lives as well. ISIS posed little, if no threat to the United States at any point. That's an important point. So they're using this to justify their further occupation of Syria. And looking at our reporting, you'll also have seen the work of Diliana Getingera and U.S. weapons trafficking to ISIS terrorists in Yemen. This is proven, it's documented. We've shown you these reports, Mike. So That's where we're going to leave that story this week.
For now, but we'll see what happens next. Who is actually going to emerge as the next big boogeyman?
There'll be somebody. There'll be somebody. There'll be a new group, or there'll be a new boogeyman within ISIS. You can bet on it.
Oh, absolutely. Right, quick preview of that, but here we go. If you like what the UK column does and you would like to support us, then please head over to ukcolumn.org/community. Your help would be much appreciated and needed. Quick reminder that over the weekend, AV 10.1 took place. The live stream was available, and well done to everybody that joined on the live stream. Pretty much as soon as we're finished with the news program today, the archive of that will be available on the UK Column website as well. So get along to look at that.
And apparently it was a very successful event. Sellout crowd.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think they had almost double the amount they had last year.
Yes.
And it was a very successful event. Some great presentations.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, of course, on the Brexit issue, the thing that nobody wants to talk about is defence. So you'll be glad to know that it's not just defence union. There's now a security union being developed as well. So defence is one thing, security is another. So the European Commission is taking stock of progress they say made in the past years towards achieving an effective and genuine security union. So what's this all about? It's about the fight against terrorism. It's about information exchange, countering radicalisation, cybersecurity. But actually, in the heart of this is terrorist content online. Now, Patrick, we know that when the EU and the British government say terrorist content online, they mean content that they get terrorized by, i.e. content from the alternative media, and anybody that actually is attempting to hold their governments to account.
Well, I think the word you just said there, information exchange, that's specifically mentioned in that document there. Well, and that's what the biggest fear is also information exchange.
Yes, well, in that context, they're talking about information exchange between governments.
Okay, well, I thought they meant between us, between citizens.
And it's a good point, because much of the language that's used in the press release could have multiple meanings. But anyway, terrorist content online, they want to manage that and deal with that, and of course the big one. Disinformation, that has to be dealt with as well.
But not any disinformation coming from mainstream media or government. That's not included, right?
No, indeed, and even thinking about terrorist content online, there's been no moves to remove any genuine terrorist content online. So from ISIS or from Al Qaeda, all that content is still online. It's still on the various social media platforms, because of course without that feed of information, the mainstream media couldn't build their narratives.
And by the way, I'm going to also point out that if you watch CNN, you watch Sky, you watch any of the major networks, they were the best advertising and public relations firms for ISIS and al-Nusra during the length of the Syrian conflict and also the ISIS takeover of Iraq. They even showed ABC News and others, and I've showed this at my AV presentations, Mike, bomb making lessons, basically. How to make bombs in the kitchen, literally how to. And they pull this stuff directly off of AMAC, ISIS's news agency, and they broadcast that. And I'll say as well, Mike, the White Helmets propaganda videos were great recruitment tools for extremists in European countries in North America who wanted to have adventure and join jihad. They're watching the babies being carried nonstop 24/7 by the White Helmets because of the evil Assad and the Russians. So that's one of the purposes of that propaganda, was also to recruit terrorists to go to the war zones in Syria and Iraq. Because you look at the numbers of people they picked up in Iraq and Syria or who've been killed, lots of French, British, Dutch, German, Norwegian, Swedish, endless amount of jihadist, American, Canadian. So these are all the countries in the West where they're watching all these mainstream reports.
Right.
So this is a lot of the content that they're also being used to motivate and radicalize them in a way, because it is propaganda, the way that the mainstream has been spinning the conflict in Syria. So
the point here is, Patrick, that when they talk about removing terrorist content online, they're not talking about content from ISIS and these types of terrorist organizations. They're talking about content which causes them terror personally because they are extremely concerned about
things that terrify the establishment.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, sticking with the censorship agenda here, you'll be glad to know that this organization, NewsGuard, now they of course provide a helpful plugin for most browsers, which allows you to identify whether a news source is to be trusted or not. Well, you'd be glad to know that they have done a deal with one of the major internet advertising agencies, which means that if you are rated red, which means untrustworthy, that you will not be considered a suitable partner for the adverts that the advertising agencies are providing, and therefore you'll be demonetized. Your website will be demonetized. This is the next step on this. Now, in their press release, they of course are citing RT, which holds a red ranking for its English language news site, as well as China's global television network, because well, they say that those two organizations funded by their respective governments, and that they're therefore not trustworthy.
Automatically, that they're publishing disinformation by virtue of the fact that they're Russian and Chinese.
Right.
But they don't offer any specific examples of anything that qualifies for disinformation or anything that's not factual or anything that's being reported wrongly.
Right.
So NewsGuard's a very dangerous organization, and I would think NewsGuard should be opened up to lawsuits from a number of businesses and websites should they be mislabeled, should they be smeared as red or unreliable, that NewsGuard should then be prepared to be sued.
Well, I think that's ultimately that's probably where we're going with this. But this is part of this whole attack on what is being described as disinformation. When, as we've established many times, Patrick, the majority of disinformation is coming from the mainstream press, and that's not
and government.
well.
Too.
Yes.
Governments do supply a lot of disinformation, but in the West, the governments launder their disinformation or their lies or fake claims. They launder it through the mainstream press,
Right.
through official or mainstream trusted news sources. So that's how they launder the information.
Now, of course, the attack on freedom of speech and the news began in this country in 2011 with the Leveson inquiry, and of course they were using the bad behaviour of some journalists in order to carry out a very targeted attack on the mainstream press as a whole. And while the majority of the attack on the narrative these days is on alternative media and social media, that Leveson aspect of this has never really gone away. They really want full control of the press here. And in the last few weeks and months, we've started to hear noises coming from one particular section of the royal family who are making claims about bad behaviour of journalists, and they're starting to ramp up very much the same type of narrative that we saw in the run-up to the Leveson inquiry. And so you'll be glad to know, Patrick, that a group of female MPs have put together a letter to Meghan Markle saying, "Dear Madam, as women MPs of all political persuasions, we wanted to express our solidarity with you in taking a stand against the often distasteful and misleading nature of the stories printed in a number of our national newspapers concerning you, your character and your family." Now, we've got to keep in mind that particularly since Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, she has built a team of PR people around her of a scale that the Kardashians would be jealous of, frankly. And so she has gone out of her way to make sure that there are multiple stories featuring her in every mainstream press organization in the country. And now, in the last few weeks, she's suddenly saying, "Oh, it's not going all my way and they are being nasty to me." And suddenly we're seeing the same narrative being built, that the mainstream press is being bad to people and they need to be reined in some way.
Let me just remind people on this story, Mike. Meghan and Harry have sold and marketed their image for money. There's books, there's calendars, posters, okay, hello, all the different magazine spreads, commemorative this and that, okay? They have, like you said, a team of publicists, stylists, fashion consultants, all sorts. It's a massive operation. They are not doing all that for free, okay? So there's two sides to that coin. If you're marketing and selling your image and your life, and you're profiting from that personally, then you're going to have to accept the fact that there's some nasty people in the press that are wanting to sell stories on the back of your misery as well, because hasn't that been part of the celebrity deal, the Faustian celebrity deal since
the media began?
Since the media began.
Yes.
So I think what you pointed out, Mike, is probably more likely the reason we're seeing this is to ramp up a new effort for press regulation by the state.
Absolutely. So this is what Piers Morgan had to say on Twitter this morning. While female MPs accuse press of being racist towards Meghan Markle, I hope they can justify that extraordinary claim and that they urgently clarify which stories they think are unfairly intrusive. This looks like a very dangerous attempt to suppress the freedom of the press. I don't often agree with Piers Morgan, but in this meeting...
You know things are topsy-turvy when you're agreeing with Piers Morgan on anything.
Absolutely. Now, if anybody wants to find out a little bit more about the background to the Leveson inquiry, because that will give you a clue as to what's going on at the moment, do have a look at our articles on Leveson on the UK Column website. This particular one was published in the newspaper that we used to publish about 6 months before. It would have been mid-2011 or so. Gives a clue as to the types of people that were pressuring for press regulation in 2011, 2012. And I think you'll find the same types of people at it again as this narrative starts to build over the next couple of months. Okay, now if you remember last week before, we were talking about Mark Carney and the green agenda in banking, the fact that central banks are starting to get on this issue of promoting the idea of human-generated climate change and the need to deal with that, and he was making out-and-out threats against any company that didn't adapt, including companies in the financial system. He was saying that they would go bankrupt. And really at the heart of this was central banks encouraging commercial banks to only lend money to companies that were absolutely 100% on board with the green agenda and the green policies going forward. Well, I just wanted to make the point briefly that it's not just the governor of the Bank of England that's pushing this. Here's another governor this time, the governor of the Bank of Finland, who was pushing a couple of days ago pretty much the same policy. He was a little bit softer in his language, but I was just fascinated by a couple of the things he said. This, for example, in 1987, the World Commission on Environment and Development released a report entitled Our Common Future. I'm a proud owner of the first edition of that report, which highlighted that economic growth, ecological sustainability, and social justice cannot be separated from each other. And really the point here is that what we're seeing with this real push on this green agenda at the moment isn't new. It's been around for a long time. And while it's been moving quite slowly up to now and quite under the surface, it has broken surface now, and they're being quite overt about their intentions. It is being driven by the banking system.
It is. James Corbett did a really good video series on this very issue about how big oil conquered this issue, and how big oil is actually some of the same people from big oil, the Rockefellers and all these scions of energy monopolies. They're the ones who have financed and who have seeded and backed Maurice Strong and all of the sort of early progenitors of this movement. It's all from the, quote, big oil.
Yes.
So it's not really about green energy versus non-green energy. It's about control of the economy.
Right.
So I encourage people to go search on James Corbett and big oil on YouTube. You'll find those videos. They're very educational.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're nearly out of time. I just want to briefly mention Keith Vaz. Brian would want me to do this. Now, this is going back to 2018. I think there's a July that this Sun article was published. Disgraced Labour MP Keith Vaz faces a fresh police probe over rent boys, the Sun can reveal. Police dropped their initial investigation, they said, into the Leicester East MP 18 months ago, but Parliament's New Standards Commissioner Catherine Stone has told MPs she's referring the case back to the Met. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because at the end of last week, he was finally prosecuted, in inverted commas, over this issue of him attempting, or he had been caught with some rent boys, and he had suggested to the two rent boys that he would be able to go and buy some cocaine for them. And though he hadn't actually bought the cocaine and hadn't committed a criminal offence, it was certainly something outside the realms of parliamentary standards. And so here we are 3 years later, and finally they decided that he would be suspended for 6 months. That was the result, a 6-month suspension. Of course, the timing of it is interesting because we're now
suspension from what? Buying cocaine?
Yeah, well, from Parliament. You don't need to buy cocaine in Parliament. You just go into the toilets.
That's what we're told. Yes, that's what we're told.
But anyway, 6-month suspension for Parliament. Of course, the timing of it is interesting, Pat, because we're within a couple of weeks now of Parliament being dissolved. So the question is, will he even be an MP? So he isn't going to get any opportunity to serve that. But really, we should just remember that there's more to this than just the rent boys story. So this is going back also to, this is April 2018. Anti-fraud police confirmed they're looking into allegations made against Labour MP Keith Vaz and his unexplained £4 million wealth. This has gone no further either, it seems. I'm not sure what protection Keith Vaz has, but it seems like it either doesn't, there's nothing sticks to him, or it takes so long for anything to stick to him that really there can be no consequences.
Who knows what goes on in the back halls of Westminster, Mike, in terms of blackmail and leverage against politicians and overlapping agendas. It's a very, very
dirty,
seedy place, yes. I'm sure.
Yes. Right. Well, look, we've got to leave it there for now. Thank you very much for joining me today. Brian, unfortunately, has to go to a funeral on Friday. So Patrick, well, not unfortunate, Patrick's back for that. David Scott will be here as usual. And we'll be doing a little bit on the Grenfell Tower report on Friday. And also, we want to mention the sad passing of Alex G. And we'll do a little bit on Alex on Friday as well. So hopefully we'll see you then. And in the meantime, have a good week. Bye-bye.